Cheers, everybody. We are back for another edition of Bourbon on a Budget. Myself, TJ Pittenger, Ben Cock, and Brendan Sinone. Gentlemen, recording a little bit later this week than we normally do. How are you guys doing?
Dandy, TJ. Thank you for asking.
Doing very well, sir.
Ben returns from the land of milk and tequila to come on the Bourbon Podcast and hang out with us again. Ben, we're appreciative of you gracing us with your presence and screwing up our recording day by 2 days. So, gentlemen, we have a different show today. We're going to have a conversation as Ben reads his Bible about a few different things. One being bourbon marketing. We're going to talk some allocation and then talk about the monster or the beast that is Fight Club. Just kidding. The secondary market, which exists. None of us are saying that we've necessarily partaken in it, but we know it exists, and we've done a lot of research for this episode, so we're going to talk about it. We will, of course, continue our segment that we started last week, our replacement bourbon. This week, what are we replacing this week, Brendan?
So last week we replaced Blanton's, a Buffalo Trace product. This week we were replacing another Buffalo Trace product. I'm noticing a theme here. We like Buffalo Trace, but some stuff's kind of pricey. Weller 12. Weller 12. Some people call it poor man's Pappy.
Poor Pap.
Poor Pap.
So we'll replace
a wheated bourbon, 12 years old.
We'll replace that, and then we will get to our favorite segment, Pursuits and Purchases. Brendan has a story for us at some point through this episode. We'll have story time with Brendan. Then we'll get out of here and remind you to check out our review. That'll come out on Thursday of Smoke Wagon Small Batch. So enjoy that. Hey, if you're listening to this, if you're watching, if you're tuned in, please go give us a follow on all the different social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Bourbon on a Budget. Search it, and we would appreciate interacting with you there. Let's jump right into it, gentlemen. What are you drinking tonight?
I am double fisting right now. I got Weller 12 here. Heyo. It's a regular Thursday night over in the Sinone household. I got the Weller 12 here. And I don't want to give it away yet, but I'm going against the one that I'm replacing it with. So I'm trying to just do a little research and homework here before the big reveal comes out. That's what I got. What about you, TJ?
I am drinking a potential replacement that I may mention for it.
Okay.
Don't know if it's going to be the true replacement or not, but it's got a chance. Ben, what about yourself?
Well, like you said, I just got back into town from Tequilaville. So to reset my palate, I'm going with the OG Wild Turkey 101.
Very nice. Very nice. True OG for sure.
Yep.
One of your favorites.
That's right.
Also, I don't even know if you like the flavor of it. You just love the price.
It's a great price. Great price, great flavor. What's there to not like about this?
I'm just saying. I think you like the cheap. I think you like being cheap more than you like.
I enjoy being cheap. Yes.
Whoa.
I didn't mean that in a loving way. I didn't mean that in a mean way. Ben and I will drink good stuff this weekend, and
that's right.
And not tell Brendan
at TJ's house.
It's like who doesn't have to put their kid down at the other person's house, but who also has to give up the good whiskey.
That's right, baby.
There's pros and cons to both. Exactly. All right, so we talk about bourbon marketing. We've woven this subject in and out in between several episodes. I read a couple of books just before we started the podcast. Actually, one while we had just started it. I read The Bourbon Empire and I read Pappy Land. And both of those books, Pappy Land, focusing on the life and career of Julian Van Winkle, who started the Pappy Van Winkle line, and The Bourbon Empire, which really went through both modern day bourbon and the history of bourbon. And they both really focused a lot on the idea and the concept of bourbon marketing and how sometimes the story behind a bourbon, which isn't usually or almost never true, or the packaging or the price or the labeling is sometimes the reason we buy things, as opposed to the actual juice that's inside. We've talked about this, guys. Like, if we've done a lot with Buffalo Trace over the last few weeks, if Buffalo Trace says that an item is allocated, there could be 10 million of this allocated item, and they are all going to be bought within an hour. Like that's just how that works. We know that that's how the game works.
Yep.
We know that something being allocated or having shiny marketing or being in a really cool bottle with a really cool topper or having a date on it that you're special to you does not make the juice any more valuable. We know all that. And yet we still fall into the trap. And if we see an allocated bottle at retail on any shelf, we're all three buying it. Buy immediately.
Yep.
We know that. We know that like this could be on the shelf right next to a 1920, and the 1920 could be inherently better, and we're buying this over the 1920. Like every time. Why? And we know the marketing game. I keep saying that over and over and over again. Why?
Well,
Brendan,
how about this?
Oh, I'm very pensive. But Ben had something to say. You go first. I'm working on a theory here that I want.
Yeah. Here's my theory. This is more than a theory. This is the truth. We've said multiple times that bourbon is about community and stories. You sit down, hang out, and just chat. The problem is the makers of this bourbon know that we like stories, so they tell us one to sell their product, and it's told well enough that we're like, all right, we're on board. Let's do this. Blanton's first single barrel, super, allocated at the beginning. Jefferson Ocean, aged at sea. The rocking of the boat makes it, that much better. So the stories matter to us, and if we can get sold on the story, then we can get sold on the bourbon. There you go.
That's very true. It's why marketing is so important, because it creates a narrative. It creates it impacts the way you view anything. I mean, marketing's all over it, and subliminal marketing that we're not even aware is happening. It's all over the place. As it applies to bourbon, the heritage of bourbon is something that is pumped into that narrative a lot. Like Blanton's is a good example of it. Elijah Craig is one that's highly disputed, like as being like the original bourbon, and the actual date they put on the front. What is it? 1789. It's disputed, like whether that's an actual like legitimate like start of when Elijah Craig started making bourbon in America. I don't know. What I will, and how that impacts it is tough to say. Go back a few months ago, guys, when we played a mean trick on Ben with Eagle Rare, and he thought it was Basil Hayden.
Yeah, dick move.
That was TJ's idea, for what it's worth.
Brendan was super stoked about it.
I would never do something like that to you, Ben. Think about how perception impacted the way Ben viewed what's one of his favorite like bourbons at the price, assuming you can find Eagle Rare at $30. He thought it was Basil Hayden, which he doesn't like, and he gave a really bad score to the Basil Hayden. Now, he was suspicious along the way, to credit Ben and his palate. Right. But the marketing of Basil Hayden being this just kind of like 80 proof and having the expectation what is versus Eagle Rare, which it's got the name Rare in it. It's got a pretty cool bottle, is Buffalo Trace, and all these things that he knows, that weighs on the way Ben thought about this. And that impacts all of us. Bottling impacts all of us. Knowing the story behind it does too. We're kind of at the will of these people who do the marketing, and I would like to say it makes a difference to or does it make a difference in that you could just appreciate something blind, but no, a cool bottle is going to certainly impact, and a cool story behind the bottle is going to impact the way we all perceive it and view it.
I think that the power of suggestion is so real. And not only the bottles that we buy, but just anything, right? Like if we were all drinking the same bourbon right now, and I told you I'm getting an orange zest, whether you were getting that before or not, you're going to be like, now I'm picking that up,
orange zest.
I get that. Like Kara asks me a lot of times when she tries things like, oh, what is this supposed to taste like? Oh, what should I be tasting here? And I try and tell her whatever you think it tastes like, your sweet, taste buds may be picking something up. My salty taste buds may be picking up something up. And the sour ones maybe, you're going to taste what picks up to you. So I don't want to tell you chocolate, because as soon as I tell you that, the flavors in bourbon are almost not, they're so subtle at times that they're almost not strong enough to overtake when your mind gets chocolate into it. When your mind gets chocolate into it, that's all it can taste, right? And that's where the power of suggestion comes in. And so it happens from the level of the store and that you're buying it at, all the way down to drinking in the glass. I've read in those two books that in Japan and in other countries, they price Jim Beam way higher than they do here because it's just marketing. In those cultures, it is more favorable to spend more on something where we're like bourbon on a budget, or we're like, oh, where can we find the best value for the cheapest cost? Like whatever, we're very frugal, right? Or not saying it backwards, but like we're cheap on things. They're not like that in other countries. They want to spend more money. And so they price like Jim Beam and products that we would look, Jim Beam white label and products that we would look at as just kind of being cheap. They price them higher there so that people will actually buy them, because they won't buy them at like $18 a bottle. They just won't, like they would look at that as like, nah, I'm not buying that. So anyway, just something to kind of consider. Marketing becomes such a huge story. Most whiskey is not even priced at like how difficult it is to, like, a lot of beer. So Brandon, we talked about this, like a lot of craft beer, or just being like into craft beer at one point, is a lot of craft beer is very, very labor intensive. Like some of your bigger stouts and stuff like that, like they're really, really expensive to make, right? Like the adjuncts and the things that they throw in those stouts, basically every IPA costs about the same to make. And that's why every IPA is about the same price. Like you don't have you don't have stuff that's like way, way higher unless it's just kind of like super allocated or super hard to find. Bourbon, at the end of the day, like depending on like how, if you're aging something at the same length of time, it costs the same thing to make it, right? Like it's not like it's any more or less expensive. You're using the same, now can rye be a little more expensive than wheat or different things like that? Yes. I mean, for sure. Corn, absolutely. Yeah. But if you're looking at like a similar mash bill, a similar age, similar proof, like it should be the same price, but it's not. Like you see stuff all the time that like has way varying prices. Proof doesn't matter. Mash bill doesn't matter. Wild Turkey calls their stuff high rye, and proof is way up on it, and they sell it for way, way cheap. You know what I'm saying? Like, so anyway, all that said to say the prices are set at whatever they want it to be set at, right? They put a nice label on it. They put a horse on the top of it, and all of a sudden you charge more. So anyway, I've rambled for a minute. I'll let you guys go for a sec.
Is Blanton's that when you pitched this idea the other day, TJ, about doing this topic of marketing, how it impacts us, Blanton's and the horse on the top was the first bourbon I thought of. Is that the quintessential like idea of an overpriced bourbon that is hyped up by marketing and appeal? And to me, that's the first one I thought of. I don't know if you guys have a better example, but that's the quintessential overhyped, market-induced bourbon out there.
Yeah, it is relatively, at bars, it is relatively easy to find. You can find blends at just about every bar that you go to that has like more than just Woodford or
good high end bars that'll have Buffalo Trace stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, every cigar bar that you go to has it, and they don't have to be like a crazy great cigar bar or anything, So a lot of places have it. Not super hard to find. Ben and I were at a couple of places on City Walk that had it fairly easily, fairly quick to find. In fact, they had like single barrel bottles of it. We were at Animal Kingdom, and I think they had one at that restaurant we went to in Animal Kingdom. We didn't end up getting that because we wanted the store pick. So, but it's rarely easy, or it's fairly easy to find in stores. But yeah, I 100% agree that it is the one that's marketed like that. But I mean, I think of other ones too. I mean, we talked about,
for me, I would disagree and say that Pappy has got to be the most overhyped. Yeah, probably the best marketed overhyped bottle out there. And the reason I judge that from, though, I judge that from is MSRP to cost on the like secondary or in restaurants.
But is that even marketing? Like that's more like consumer driven,
right? No, 100%. But I'm just saying overhyping. To me, marketing is like making people go out and buy it, but the hyping is all on the consumer side. It's like paying above, MSRP and that kind of stuff. And so you can go and get a bottle of Pappy that MSRP is at, $75, $60, and that trades on the secondary for 10 times that, 11 times that, right? So and Blanton's isn't in that realm. It's, it's a 2 times bottle if you can find an MSRP. So in my head, the immediate one is Pappy. because I can go and talk to any person who's never heard of bourbon, and I can say Pappy, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, they know it. They know what it is." And Blanton's is very close to that. Don't get me wrong. But
so I think
Blanton's.
I think you're both right. Brendan's right on the aspect of like the way that it's marketed, like more from the distillery and more from bars and more from like the man, right? And Pappy is much more of a secondary, like overhyped by the consumer type thing. Mm-hmm. I think most consumers don't hype Blanton's like that because they understand that it is average juice. Or I'd say above average. I'll take that back. Blanton's is above average juice. Like if we were to rate it, we would give it a 5.5 or 6 out of 10 before value, right? Like it's not bad by any means. It's better than a lot of things, but then for value, not being able to find it is tougher. So anyway, all that said, Blanton's is one, Brendan, that I thought of. You know, Pappy certainly, really anything from the Buffalo Trace line, which we'll talk about allocation a little bit more here in just a second. Another one to me is not a good one. Willet Pot Still. I think that's a bottle that is absolutely marked. People that have not had that buy it because of the bottle. 100%. I did. I literally just finished it off with an old fashioned for Kara on Monday night. Thank God that bottle is gone, and now I only have the 1.75 of it left.
Oh, is that all? That'll go quick. Holy crap! Jeez.
But I think that's a bottle that very similarly is sought after. Not sought after, that's a bad way to say it, but like because of its bottle is purchased with some of the worst juice that absolutely exists. So
it's valued almost exclusively because of the bottle, because of the marketing. There is no way that is being behind counters at an ABC or something that's getting moved quickly at any other shop if it's not for that bottle. There's no way.
Right.
That's a good example. Yeah, it's a good one.
Can you think of more? I mean, we kind of are doing this off the cuff. We wanted this to be more of a conversation.
I'll go. How about I go from the opposite direction? Like there's bottles that's
what she said.
Yeah. There's bottles like I just don't buy because
the marketing sucks.
It's a nightmare. Like I'll go and then I'll look at like Noah's Mill and Roan's Creek or whatever, those bottles. And I look at them like these are wine bottles. And I'm not attracted. And supposedly like they're pretty good stuff. They have, what's like the cask strength ones, like 115?
That's the Noah's Mill for that.
Right. And that's supposed to be like really good. And I can't get myself to buy it. I go in there, I'm like, I have a bottle of wine at the house that's, looks exactly the same on the label, and I can't do it. But that just from the opposite direction there, it's like it doesn't appeal to me on a sitting on the shelf kind of thing.
You also said that about Peerless.
It's my choice, by the way. Ben hates this label.
Yeah, it's Old Scout.
Oh, Smooth Ambler. It's MGP juice. Yeah. It's 99 proof. It's very, very good what's inside the bottle, but Ben doesn't like the Smooth Ambler design. It is very boring, very generic, and some of the other stuff that they have, he said it looks like someone drew on it with crayon.
Yeah,
rude.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I picked up a bottle of Michter's 10-year bourbon like 2 weeks ago, and I remember getting that bottle and being like, this is a great juice, and the bottle is better. Like the bottle is so solid. I was like, I love holding the bottle, buying it like that. You look at it and you're like, man, I think it's great looking. That is great looking. So there's just bottles that hit for me and some that don't.
Spoiler alert, one that we're going to review later this week, a bottle that's amazing, the Smoke Wagon, both the uncut. Yeah. Isn't that awesome?
Great bottle.
So I think we're all kind of trying to weigh the bottle matters, like that's part of it, and you'd like to say it doesn't, that we're all above that, but no, the bottle is part of the story and part of the experience, and if it's a cool enough bottle, it's one that you can keep. It's an infinity bottle, like there's some level of value. That's kind of what this show's all about, right? Is we're trying to find what the value of different bourbons and whiskeys in general are, but that's part of it. It is for sure. I don't know the exact amount and ratio, but the bottle matters.
It shouldn't be, but it is.
It definitely is. But I will say this: unlike Ben, who would have never bought the Peerless that I introduced him to, I will buy something if heavily recommended. If the bottle is not great, I will show you a couple bottles that I love. I love the Michter's bottles. This is the actual toasted barrel, but the Michter's bottles are just so they're just classic Like Cowboys are on a campfire burn. I don't know if you can say that in 2021 anymore without getting canceled. But like
just Cowboys and a campfire? Is that
I don't know. Who knows who that's going to offend? I like the Michter's bottles a lot. This Jack Daniels bottle, Jack Daniels, just regular black label Jack Daniels, like that's a great bottle. Like the juice is whatever to me.
Oh, it's
that's
quintessential. It's a
fantastic bottle.
Barbers use it like as like a spritzer for like because it's such a bourbon.
This one that we got,
another. Oh, that Jack Daniels single barrel stuff is pretty classy looking.
I like the bullet. And then I want to talk about this. We're gonna move into some allocation stuff for sure. And I don't if you have any other thoughts on marketing and stuff. Mm-hmm. Every Buffalo Trace product, and it's not. Maybe I'm just buying into the game right now. Name a Buffalo Trace product with a bad bottle.
I mean, the Weller's. I'll pull it by the Weller.
Yeah,
it's
Weller's
okay. It's kind of
to me.
It's kind of
not a bad bottle
to me.
No, but it's not bad. I like it.
It's I think their bottles. I think their bottles get boring as you go up the line. Like if you look at all the BTAC bottles, like they're not like super like amazing design. It's just they don't need to put the design element into it because they're gonna
see. I like the horns on the Georgia Stag.
I do. I like the Stag one. The other ones are boring to me, but the Stag one, I have an infinity bottle going right now with an old Stag bottle. Partially, it's probably Stag too. E.H. Taylor, I like the yellow on the label and it looks old fashioned, but the bottle's just kind of
and labeling matters in the bottle too. So I mean, we'll say that like the labeling of it. Certainly, buying into the Buffalo Trace hype is a big deal for sure. Okay, so allocation. We talked a little about marketing. We brought up allocation just very briefly. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Like, is there any allocated bottle out there on the market right now that you wouldn't buy at retail?
Yeah, probably
Blanton's. I've passed on Blanton's before
at retail at $60.
Less than that. It was at Costco for like $55, and I didn't get it.
Yeah.
Because you didn't know about our next topic with the secondary market.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, actually, at that point, I wasn't really aware of the secondary market. But no, I paid like $110 for my first bottle of Blanton, $75 for the second. And by the third, I was like, no, not again. You're not getting me a third time, Blanton.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd probably agree. What was the question again?
Are there any allocated bottles at retail that you wouldn't get right now?
Yeah. Probably Elijah Craig. Barrel proof. Supposedly the B521 is not great, so I probably wouldn't buy that. That's like a $70 bottle. I feel like if I can find other bottles at $70 that are just as good without having to search it out. I think allocation is a topic that comes very it's very like inside. So like people who are just like want to go out and find a nice bottle of bourbon that aren't in the bourbon scene, they wouldn't know or even get their hands or be able to buy one. So it's kind of like segmenting. It ostracizes a group of people. So is there a bottle that I wouldn't buy at that price? Yeah, probably that Elijah Craig. I don't like Elijah Craig's bottles.
I've passed on Weller like Special Reserve, which at this point is allocated. Like I used to be able to find it at $22 all the time in South Georgia, and eventually I had like 2 or 3, and I knew it was starting to get rare and more expensive, and I had chances to buy it again like in that same price range. And I was just like, no, I had 2 deep, and I did not need any more at that point. It just was very average to me. I could find better bottles at $30 compared to what I was getting in that for $25. That was another one.
I got a Special Reserve for $18 the other day for.
Well, that's a good price.
Yeah, for ABC. We should review that. It's not like a world beater, mind blowing type thing, but it was good. It's a good bottle for $18.
For 18, if you get it for sub 20, yeah, that's a hard one to beat. But once you start getting 25 to 30,
questionable. Yeah, Ben, you had a thought there? I kind of cut you off with the.
I was about to say I passed on that. That Weller at ABC because I was like,
and they complained about it the whole way home, so you don't get a
well, I just like,
you don't get a pass for passing.
He was complaining that he passed it like buyers, lack of buyer's remorse.
Lack of buyer's remorse. Man,
I'm not a huge weak guy, and I'm like, whatever. Like it's not a big of a deal. But there's some bottles that you're like, I probably should have at least one Weller product in my collection, just so I can be like, I can have it.
But that's
because I want to drink it because I want to just have it in my collection, kind of like street cred.
So what I'll say is, it would be very hard for me to pass up on a lot of allocated bourbons at retail. Unless I just had an exorbitant amount of them. Because like you said, Ben, even some of them, we'll get into the secondary market here in just a minute, but even like that Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, that's $70-$80, right? That only flips for like 100. So, even if, like you're not going to buy that and flip it. What I will say is that like bottles like this, like $55-$60, this is the best gift you could possibly get. People people that do it.
So TJ is holding up a Blanton's for people listening.
Oh yeah, sorry for the listeners. At $55, like I think I actually have an extra one of these. I think it's going to end up going to my stepdad for his birthday, right? Like, and he will flip that I gave him this, right? And so I don't know. To me, they kind of make great gifts. And then anything that's like more highly sought after, like some of your high-end Weller products, some of your high-end BTAC products. I'm not passing those up very often. I guess Buffalo Trace, Buffalo Trace is not an allocated product though, so like that's a little bit different.
Depends on where you go.
It's kind of hard to find, but I've passed that up at retail. But I also have a lot of it around right now. Have a lot of it in a
aging barrel.
Aging barrel. Sheesh, no brain here tonight. That we will try in the next 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
All right, let's go here and let's move on to our last segment. But let's have this conversation real quick. A lot of people, I feel like, are afraid to talk about this or don't want to talk about this, but I mean, it's a real thing that exists, and so I don't mind kind of just kicking it off. I feel like I've been talking a ton, so I'll let Brendan either ask me a question or start out here, or you kind of take this conversation in whatever direction you want it to go in. But the secondary market, the big bag wolf of the bourbon industry. What are your thoughts on the secondary market, Brendan, or what questions do you have, or where are we at?
So I will preface this by saying that the secondary market is technically, we say it's illegal, right? Like you can't resell whiskey
without a license, right?
Without a license.
Yes.
So
illegal.
So I'm just throwing it out there. If you don't know, you know now. Now that being said, there are tons and tons, hundreds and thousands of Facebook groups, and I actually read a story pretty recently, about Facebook kind of cracking down on that, and how that secondary market through Facebook is kind of responsible for the jacked up prices of, we mentioned Blanton's and Pappy's. So it's a home for where people will get bourbons, flip it, and the price just keeps going up because people keep buying it, right? That's part of what that secondary market dictates. So that's what the secondary market is. So you got to be careful with that. I guess what advice would you give to people? Well, can we give advice to people, TJ, on the secondary market?
Sure, but how just
what would you be careful? Like, if say someone was going on the secondary market, understood the risks inherent to that, what are potential downfalls and risks of it, and I guess what are potential benefits of going to that secondary market to try to get a coveted bottle of whiskey?
So some bottles are going to be worth that secondary price to you, no matter what the risks are, right? So the first risk is obviously, like Brendan mentioned, it is illegal, right? As is not wearing a seatbelt, as is going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, right? There are things that are illegal that are done that are kind of not going to be advocated, but a lot of you guys are already doing them anyway. So I don't, I'm not going to tell you how you live your life.
Have you guys gotten or heard? Well, I know you haven't. Have you heard of anyone? Because you're good choir boys who would never do anything like this. But have you heard of anyone who's gotten busted for selling on the secondary or buying on the secondary?
Never once.
Not directly, but I have know of someone who was in a group who got busted for selling, and they got found out through Venmo, and there was they put the whiskey emoji, the whiskey glass emoji on Venmo, and they got found out that way. And I
found out by Venmo or the feds or what?
I think it was no, I got pushed up to federal people. It wasn't just Venmo. And
ATF.
And I don't think it was as huge. People weren't going to jail. I don't even know they were facing fines. It's more slap on the wrist kind of deal. But and same thing if you were to ship a bottle through UPS or or FedEx and that broke and they found that out. I've heard before that you get kind of like a warning kind of deal, but obviously, I mean, there are consequences to it. I just don't know if they're like super severe or not.
It's like with anything else. You have to. There's not a super severe consequence for a speeding, right? By like 5 miles, 10 miles an hour. I actually used to ship, not like in any, shipping alcohol is illegal. So I was going to say not in an illegal way, but I just had a buddy that moved out to Texas and loved beer from one of our local breweries here. And so he would just pay me the cost of it. He wouldn't give me any more money. I wasn't making any money. And then I'd ship it up and send it to him. Right. Well, I had a couple of boxes just one. I had one box that didn't make it. And I got a letter from FedEx like, hey, this isn't really allowed. If you apply for the right kind of license, you can ship alcohol, but it's a very expensive license that like only liquor stores and things like that have. So again, be very careful if you are shipping, receiving alcohol, because again, it's not legal. It's actually, I want to say it's only really illegal through the USPS, but it's against the rules through FedEx, UPS. Kind of a gray area there. If you get caught multiple times with it, you are certainly going to get in trouble. If you're in some of these Facebook groups, if this is something you're kind of looking at, I mean, just be aware, like a lot of these bottle purchases are not happening as like full on bottle purchases. Like Blanton's on the secondary market, it's going to go between $110 and $120, right? So it's a $55, $60 bottle. It goes for about double its price on the secondary market. We've talked about how some of the Pappies go for like 7, 8, 9, 10 times their value. Those obviously are much more rare, much more allocated, and that's why the prices on those go way up. Blanton's you can I don't say you can find anywhere, but you can kind of find a Blanton's anywhere. Like it's not that hard.
If you look hard enough, you could probably find it within a few months.
Yeah, without a doubt. Where Pappy comes out once a year, there's not a lot of bottles for different places. Like it's very difficult to get a Pappy. So that's what drives the price up. A lot of these bottles are not being sold. Like people aren't just on these groups and in these messages and on these boards and stuff buying things outright. A lot of the way that this happens is through raffles. And so you buy into a raffle with, however many spots the raffle are. That's how, the price of the bottle divided by that many spots is what you pay per spot. And you buy however many spots you want, and you have a 1 in whatever chance of winning. So if a bottle's $100 and there's 10 spots based on whatever, whatever lottery is running that night or whatever randomizer is running that night, you buy a spot at $10, you have a 10% chance of winning the bottle. It's kind of a cheap way to get an expensive bottle. Cheaper way. It's also a cheap way to throw away $10 because you have a 90% chance of losing. So that's how a lot of these bottles are sold. So when we tell you that George C. Stagg's like a $650 bottle of bourbon, a lot of people aren't truly paying $650 for that. They're playing in a raffle that gives them a chance at winning it. Maybe they're buying 2 or 3 spots because they feel lucky on some certain numbers or whatever. So don't go out and spend $650 on a bottle of anything. I mean, unless you really, really want it. Like Ben and I really, really want birthday bourbons for our kids' birthday years.
Right. Probably not going to buy secondary on that.
Right. Yeah. Like I'm just kind of like holding out for the ABC Vault invite that has that on it, which they sent one out today and it was all wine, so they can go to hell.
Oh, no. That's happened to me before. It is so disappointing.
Oh, man. I was on a big meeting today too, Ben, and that came in like while I was on the meeting.
Gotta go, guys.
And like
priorities.
Oh, like on a massive meeting that I could not just turn away. And gosh. But then I opened it up while I was in the meeting. I was like, oh, why? Like, who cares? Like, I was like, what a bunch of suckers. So
I got a question for you guys on secondary. Well, like, okay. One thing to be careful of is also like people will buy bottles, like just the bottle empty and fill it up and resell it. So be careful of that. Make sure like there's some legitimacy of where you're trying to go. Second, I had a question. Would a liquor store that's jacking up a price of something be considered secondary, like, or is that still first and just a rip off? Like,
no, that's secondary to me.
Okay.
Because to me, secondary is not necessarily who has it or had it. Because I mean, if you think about it in that perspective, like, obviously the bottle was sold to a distributor that
someone
was
has
then
had
sold
it
to
at some point.
Yeah. So secondary to me is about pricing, not necessarily who is selling it. Because the liquor store is the third person to sell it, right? Like the distillery sold it first. And then the distributor sold it, and now the liquor store is selling it.
Okay, that makes sense.
So secondary is more about the pricing retail is the pricing that the general public can get. Secondary is the second best price that they can get.
So let's say if you're going like onto Facebook and buying something, then you're paying like there's 4 tiers of people. So everyone's making money, and like up to that point, you're paying each of those. You're paying the distiller, you're paying the distributor, you're probably paying a liquor store, and then you're paying the person who's selling it as well. So just something to be mindful of. What's the most money that you guys have spent, or highest percentage you guys have spent on a secondary bottle that you felt okay with, like that you were okay overpaying? And I'll start because I have this in mind, so I asked the question so I could just ramble and talk. George T. Stagg, I spent $450 on a bottle at a liquor store. It was a bourbon that I knew I loved from trying at different bars, and I had looked for it I saw it at a certain store. I looked for about a year and a half, couldn't find it anywhere else. Tried looking online, tried looking at every time I go into different stores, would ask about it. Nothing. Eventually, like I said, you know what? I've been looking for this long enough. I still want it. I knew where I could find it. If it was still there, I went back to that store. It was still there. I think it was like $400 to $450. I talked him down a little bit on it, but still, it was about 3 to 4 times above a suggested retail price.
Ben, do you have anything? You talked about one at Christmas one time. Didn't you guys have to overpay for a bottle? Or how did that work?
Yeah, that was at just a straight liquor store though. So I don't know if I would qualify that as like secondary. And I think it was just like at MSRP. It was just a terrible bottle that was
okay.
Yeah, not necessarily. But there are bottles that like, and I certainly have no experience with buying anything on the secondary market, most because I'm too cheap. But there are bottles that I'm like, man, I really want this bottle and I don't have access to it. So like what would be the best option? Like what seems the most feasible as far as pricing wise? And I've looked, you think the Michter's barrel strength rise, I think those are on the secondary market for like $180, $200.
Yeah, you overpaid for one of those a little bit because I got it for you.
Oh, right.
Slightly, but not a ton. Like we were.
That was like in a pack or something like that. But
yeah, we're able to work some magic there.
I feel like there's a lot of value there in those. Like I would. Like I'm like, I don't know if I would directly just buy it, at that price, but I can see me being like, man, I really want this bottle. That's probably like one that I'd be like, okay, I can see me having to spend a little more money to get it. But I just feel like I like the hunt more than anything else. So I'd rather just spend, 30 hours of my time trying to find a bottle at MSRP.
Yeah. Forget about the money. The time is money.
Exactly. Forget about that, just go and try to find something.
That is part of the fun, though. I'm
looking up right now what the price of this is, MSRP. Yeah, $100. So I overpaid by something by $170, which is the going secondary rate. But I got a bottle.
What was it? Oh, sorry, you're saying it. Oh, shout out TJ.
I'll even get out of the way for the folks on YouTube. It's that Bland's Gold over my left shoulder. $100 bottle. I got it at $270. But it has my daughter's due date on it. Also has the letter of her name. It has the letter on the horse. It's tough to pass that one up. I haven't drank that. Can't tell you if the juice is any good or not. But that was
doesn't even matter.
Yeah,
doesn't even matter.
But that was a bottle that I was comfortable paying for. To me, Brendan, to answer your question, it's got to be those sentimental things. I love Michter's Toasted Barrel. This is a $250, $300 bottle on the secondary market. I would never pay that. I won this. I would never pay $300 for this. It's not that good to me. It's slightly better than the 1910, right? And so it's good. It's great. But there's a reason it MSRP's at like $70, $80, not $300, which is what it goes for in the secondary market. To me, it's just not worth that. The other thing that I will, if I don't get it through the vault, the other thing that I will overpay for one day is the birthday bourbons, with my kids' years on them. So the 19, for the 2018 and the 2020, so that I can drink those with them when they turn 21. Those would be the only other two things that I would overpay like significantly for. Other than that, I don't mind overpaying by like $10, $20 if it's a good bottle, but I'm not paying like outrageous secondary prices on stuff because I just don't care that much.
Yeah. One thing that I also is good for like in my head benchmarking like secondary like if you find a bottle that's like, for example, we got some BTEC Handy's Hedrick Rise a couple years, or like last year, like at MSRP, and that's like $100 bottle that trades secondary for like $600. And so if you say, all right, I can get 20 pours or 30 pours out of that bottle, then the value of me having, sitting down and having a drink is like, 20 or $30, right? And so then it lets me kind of go and be like, all right, who do I want to drink this bottle with? Because I know it's like super special. And the conversation I usually have is, if I'm going to pour you a drink and lay a $20 bill down next to it, you're free to choose either one. But if you would choose the $20, then you might as well just say, hey, take the 20 and, not drink the bourbon. And so like, I'll use that as kind of like a weird, like mental, like thought process of like, hey, all right, who do I want to drink this Pappy with? Or who do I want to drink this BTEC with? And just understanding like those kind of like metrics. So it's just weird because, like I said, I'm cheap. So
have you actually put down the 20 before?
No, it's usually me explaining to those people that I won't drink them with them because I know they would take the $20.
I tend to do So if we want to talk more about secondary, we can. We've probably spent, I'm just looking at the clock, enough time on it. But I will say this: speaking of that little, he gets enough shout outs on here. But speaking of that little cork, that uncorking of that bottle, my buddy Joe texted me and said he can't hear a cork be unpopped without expecting to hear acoustic guitar right behind it. So we do have the best. Oh, screw top.
I was
man, I don't even remember where I was going with that. So anyway, it must not have been that important. Ben, what were you talking about just before?
Value.
No. Yeah. So when I have people over, that's when I try to drink my allocated things. Like I try to drink my just kind of regular run of the mill, whatever, on any given night. Yeah. And when I have people over, that's when I kind of pull out the special stuff. I as much as I love this, I haven't even been, there have been 3 people that have had a drink of this since more recently than I have. Ben's one of them. Like, I don't drink this when I'm just sitting at home by myself. And not that I don't love it, but I like we've talked about, it's community, man. It's just sharing it with people, which I like just so much more.
The right people. That's all.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
There is a level of like, all right.
People that come over that have no clue about, like I'm not sharing that. But if they're into it, man, I'm all about like,
definitely
popping that out for them because I know that I like it. It's more about like introducing them something new and putting them on the same hunt. So anything else we want to hit on for the secondary market before we go and replace another secondary box?
Real quick with that in mind, I may have shared a expensive allocated, highly marketed bourbon with my father this weekend.
Tell us about it.
You guys ever hear of Pappy Van Winkle?
Never heard of it.
Never heard of her.
All right, so I got a 15-year Pappy Van Winkle. I've talked about before here on the podcast. It's one that I have almost always exclusively like drank with someone else. I like to share it with people. I'm about halfway through the bottle now as a result of that, but it's worth it because you get to people who understand what Pappy, what that name means. There's an inherent value and appreciation for it. It's just a cool thing to share with people who would otherwise not be able to find it, right? It's difficult for a lot of people to find. And I'm lucky enough to have a bottle. My father, in the past year, and he's always like, he'll do Manhattans and stuff, but he started drinking bourbon neat and trying out different things. He got a Basil Hayden, loved it. Then like now he's halfway through it and he's tried other bourbons. He's like, I kind of hate it now. Like he can't finish the Basil Hayden, so he's tried other stuff. He got like a Joseph Mangus that he like
Eagle Rare.
Oh yeah, he would probably know that. He's not stupid enough to get that confused. Benefit. So anyways, he started to appreciate, long story short, he started appreciating bourbon a little bit more. And I hadn't been able to see him during the pandemic. He's in his 70s. So like, we want to be kind of careful with that. So anyways, everyone's good to go now. Was able to travel down, safely see him this past weekend. First time I've seen him in a year and change. And I brought down a few different bourbons, including an Eagle Rare, Ben, not to be confused with Basil Hayden, but also a little sample of Pappy Van Winkle. He's never heard of Pappy Van Winkle before. So he didn't quite have an idea of like what its prestige was. And so I gave him the whole entire sample to try.
Took a shot. Just shoot it.
It wasn't quite as bad as taking a shot, and my dad watches this. So Pops, I love you. He has the big ice balls. He poured it into a big ice ball, a big glass with a big ice ball in it.
Nice. And a little bit of Coke.
No Coke. But I will say,
shout out Allie.
It was interesting.
Shout out Allie.
He enjoyed it. He saw its value. He thought it was really good. After that, like the next day, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to tell him, like, you drink the whiskey. Like the Whiskey Tribe guys say, whiskey is the way you like it. That's the best way to enjoy it, right? I butchered the way they say it, but I don't want to tell him how to drink it. The next day, we were having bourbon again, and he was like, "You know what?" He's like, "I hate what the ice does to the bourbon here." I was like, "I'm gonna get ice stones." So he's gone from watering it down and having it with Coke or having to mix it to having it with ice, to where now he bought some whiskey stones, and that's his next evolution. I think the Pappy introduced him to, like, hey, I can do this without having to have ice in it. So it's got a colder.
Yeah.
In the next year, guys, I will bring down the Pappy again, and hopefully he's doing it in a bourbon on budget Glencairn. So I think he's moving in that direction, and I think Pappy's going to be the reason why. As painful as it was to see him pour it into the ice ball, I think it'll have some value there inherently.
Mm-hmm.
You should just listen to our ice episode. What was he doing?
I mean, you gotta. Yeah. There's some things you have to discover on your own, and that was his epiphany. That was his wake up moment.
I'm glad that you were able to experience. I wanted to say experience and share, and I almost say experience, but experience. Experience that moment, because again, a really cool moment for me that we talked about was sharing that George C. Stagg with my stepdad. All right. All that said, we are replacing something tonight. Brendan, you have that bottle too. Let's get to it. Let's get out of here.
All right.
That conversation was good, though. It was longer than I thought it would be. That's what she said, but it was good.
Weller 12. We are replacing Weller 12. Again, last week we replaced Blanton's. This week, Weller 12. It is a wheated bourbon. It is aged 12 years. Weller 12. It is 45% alcohol by volume, so 90 proof. I'm not sure if you can look up while I'm rambling here, TJ, the MSRP on it, the secondary. You're going to probably spend like $300 or so secondary if you want to go buy it online.
Not to go crazy right now, but it's like $240. MSRP at ABC is $30. So I bought it.
The reason talk about hype beast on that.
The reason why this is so expensive, or one of the reasons why, I mean, it is good. This is a good bourbon. Ben, I'll let you give some tasting notes if you'd like, or so the reason why this is so expensive is because it's a trickle down of Pappy. Pappy Van Winkle is a wheated bourbon from the Buffalo Trace line. Weller 12 is like when people started realizing they couldn't find Pappy anymore or were having to pay too much, they started going to the Weller stuff. So Weller 12, when mixed with 107, is considered like a poor man's Pappy, and people will like try to do concoctions. But because it became so popular for people trying to replace the Pappy with this Weller 12, that led to this getting jacked up in price as well. So that's why this is an expensive bottle. And that's why we're trying to do some brainstorming here to think about, hey, can we replace this? Can we find something better that's similar at a much lower price, that's more readily available?
The old trickle-down economics.
So what I will tell you is, in that reading that Pappyland book, Weller 12 is a good product. We're not crapping on the product so much as we were last week with blends. When Julian Van Winkle, who started again the Pappy Van Winkle line, travels, he travels with a flask in his pocket, and it's always filled with Weller 12. So literally, the guy that tastes every Pappy that gets out into bottles to make sure that at Buffalo Trace it measures up to his standards and his family name, that guy carries around Weller 12 all the time to drink it. And so, good product, hard to find. I've gotten it twice through ABC's Vault program, which we've covered extensively on this show.
Pay us, ABC. Sponsorship. Let's go.
I just called them, I just cussed them out earlier, so maybe not the best episode to ask for that. But for that wine BS they put on. So a good product. We're not replacing this because it's just hard to find. Very, very difficult to find, especially in Florida. Find a little easier other places, but not here. Brendan, you're the one that kind of told us all about it. You're the one with the sample of it. Go ahead and give us your replacement. You go first.
So real quick, what do we like about Weller 12? I will say what is good about it is super maple syrupy pancake, very friendly, very accessible palate-wise. I can understand why Mr. Van Winkle, Julian it is, right? Mr. Van Winkle is what we'll call him for these purposes. Julian. Why Mr. Julian Van Winkle carries this around in a flask to share with people, because I think whether you are a bourbon fanatic or someone who's just getting into it, you would appreciate it because it is very nice. What I don't like about it, it's a little thin. It's at 90 proof. The 12 years gives it a little bit of complexity and layers of like some oakiness and vanilla. Go with that maple syrupy vibe that comes with the weeded mash bill, but it's thin. It just does not. To pay $300 for a 90 proof bourbon is a toughie. So what I am choosing to contend with it, to replace it potentially in my collection, Maker's Mark 101. It is the Maker's Mark mash bill. This was a limited release, although I have the feeling they're going to probably make this a regular part of their rotation. It's just at 101 proof. So where Maker's is, I think, 90 proof, just like Weller 12. Yeah, Weller 12 is going to be a regular Maker's, right? In a head-to-head. Maker's is $25. The 101 is about $40. It's proofed up just a little bit. And going back and forth between the two here, I will say that little extra proof with the Maker's, it's also a weeded mash bill. Man, I think the nose is slightly better on the Weller 12, but the flavor and the finish with the Maker's 101, yeah, for $50, if you can find, it's much better at $50 than Weller is at $100, at $200, $300, whatever. Unless you can find Weller 12 at $30, the 101 is a really good replacement in my estimation.
Ben, what do you have tonight?
So originally I was really on board with any of the higher end Makers products. They have releases annually that are incredible at that $60 to $70 price point. Their Maker's cask is usually around that $40, $50 price point also, and it's great. But since Brandon took the Maker's line, I went with a different route. And I went with Wilderness Trail Bottled and Bond. This is their wheated bourbon, and it is one of the highest mash bills for wheat. It has 24% wheat in it. This is not as cheap as your Weller at $30, but you won't be able to find Weller at $30. You're going to be finding it, it's a little bit higher than that. But what you can find less than what you can find Weller for is this. And this is from a little distillery that's growing and is, becoming more widely available. And it's a good product. 100 proof too.
So I have two different ones today. One that I'm submitting, one that fan of the show is submitting. First one, Redemption Weeded Bourbon. Find it for about $45, so much less than the secondary. You can find it under 40 at certain places. Like, it's not impossible to find a little bit less, but you can find it around 40 to 45 at a lot of places.
Is Redemption, TJ, is that MGP typically?
It is. Okay. It is. But it's got a 51% corn, 45% winter wheat, and then a 4% malted barley. Super smooth, super easy to drink, much like the Weller 12. Obviously, it's not going to have that age on it that you're going to find at a lot of at the Weller 12. Nothing that we could suggest is going to be a 12-year wheated that you could get for
$30.
What they're doing. Yeah, so that is super uncommon. Total Wine has it in stock at my closest Total Wine for $42. So you can find it from time to time at a little under 40. Good price there. Very easy to drink at the high wheat, high corn, no rye. So not a lot of spice. Very easy. Goes down easy. And it's a little bit higher proof. If I just read that correctly, I was looking at it and want to go back just to make sure that I'm correct on it. But I read that it was a 96 proof. So you get a little bit more heat than you do with the Weller. For something kind of on par with the heat and also very, very easy to drink, you're not going to get the smoothness. You're not going to get that 12-year complexity. Again, that doesn't exist anywhere else. We reviewed this, not reviewed it, but we talked about it in our Kentucky Derby episode. The Woodford Wheated. Very, very solid wheated. We had this up at the top, right? Like, we had the rye number one, we had the double oaked, and this right behind it. We didn't love their standard offering. We didn't love the malt, which is kind of funky.
We hated the malt, if I recall correctly, or close to hate.
Trying to be nice in case they wanted to sponsor us. But the wheated, the straight, okay. So here's the problem with this. This says it's a straight wheat whiskey. It's not. I mean, it's higher in wheat, but it's a 52% wheat, 20% malted barley, 20% corn, 8% rye. And you can get this from $30-$35. So
well, I think for it to be straight, any like bourbon, straight,
right, yeah,
rye, it doesn't have to be 51%. It has to be the predominant amount. So it technically is. It's hard to find like a really like what we were looking before the show. What was the one that was like 100% wheat?
OYO. Yeah, there's very few.
Yeah, very difficult.
Much easier to find a straight rye at 100% rye than it is to find 100% wheat.
All right.
I got to mute him. How do I do this? Who runs this show here? Very good. Brendan's talking on mute. That way he joined the rest of us. Yeah, Woodford Reserve. I like this product a lot. Like if you look at the Woodford products, I am probably not buying their standard offering much. I have a pretty big bottle of their double oaked, and I'm probably not buying that a ton either. Their rye and their wheat are fairly good products that you can get for pretty good prices. When you look at your standard offerings, I think we liked those the most. And if you're looking for that really, really easy to drink, smooth, sweet, kind of that pancake flavor, man, because you get that bread and you get that caramel. So like it's a lot of that maple syrup, a lot of that just, I mean, Ben likes the spicier stuff. I like the sweeter stuff. And so like this is perfect for me. Try Woodford wheated, really, really good product for the price, maybe replacing something that you can't find all the time. So if you've had Weller 12 and you wanted that taste again, maybe try some of these suggestions. If you just want to get your hands on some Weller 12 and you don't want to go into these Facebook groups and get arrested, try some of these suggestions that we've put out there for you. Pursuits and purchases. Brendan, take us home. I think you're going with anything this week.
Guys, I had a good week. So I went down to St. Pete, hung out with Pops, like I said. I took him to a couple different liquor stores. I got a couple things. But, Ben, you'd appreciate one of the things I purchased.
101 rye.
Wild Turkey.
Got one of those. Rye. Clutch.
Yeah, I've seen them in Tallahassee for like $31, $32. And I was like, that's probably a little much. This was like $22 down there. I poured it. I've been sniffing it. Not my cup of tea. Not my cup of rye. Still a little high for me. But you know what? We'll work towards it. The other one, speaking of rye and Buffalo Trace products today, I got this in the vault. Actually, my friend got it in the vault, and he didn't want it, so he gave it to me.
Nice.
Buffalo Trace Kosher Straight Rye recipe. It's 47% ABV, 94 proof. I'm not sure if the mash bill is 100% rye. I think it is, but it is legitimately kosher. Like there's rabbis who say this is kosher. So I tried to open it up during the show here. I struggled because I just cut my nails today. It's got a very difficult bottle to open up. But
are you serious?
I can't do it. I've been trying for like 10 minutes. And I didn't want people to think I was weird looking down. Look, I can't do it. It's difficult.
Wow, this is invigorating.
That's that's wild. So
anyway, actually, the teeth worked. Here we go, baby.
Today on this episode, Brendan learns how to open a bottle.
I remember my first Buffalo Trace product.
Yeah, jeez.
That's so much better already than this nasty ass Wild Turkey 101.
I got a pursuit though.
Talk to us.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys saw this yet, but Old Forester released single barrel strength rye. And since they're on the since Brown Foreman also owns Jack, I feel like it's going to be a freaking banger, right?
Well, so everything
that's checking a lot of boxes for Ben there, right?
I know.
Like, I'm hoping it's more available.
I'm hoping it's more available than the Jack Daniels one.
It's not going to be.
I know.
It's going to be like their single barrel. What I'll tell you is everything Old Forester does is fantastic. You know, like I haven't tried their mint julep. I'll pass on that one. But everything they do is really good. I lied about my pursuits and purchases. I picked up a bottle of Old Forester 100 rye, and
I thought you were about to say the single barrel.
It would have been good, Brendan. Like it would have been so good if that had been the case. But no.
Well, I wasn't listening. What was that?
Ben thought I was going to say that I picked up a bottle of what he just said he was pursuing.
Sorry, Brendan's been trying to open another bottle for the past 5 minutes.
No, I got it. It's just like my fourth bourbon at this point. We're good.
So I picked up a bottle of Old Forester 100 rye and a bottle of 1870, which is their original recipe. Both of those are double points right now at my ABC, or really at every ABC. They're all the same. So
ABC, sponsor us.
So check out those two. I know we really have talked about liking the 1920, the 1910 a ton. The 1897 and the 1870 are both still really good products. They're better than your just average bourbon. The 1870 is about $45. The 100 rye, I think, was like 20 to 25, so nothing insane there. And so to get both of them at double points, I was really only going to get the one, and then I saw the other one was double points as well and grabbed it. So not super hard to find, but again, if you're trying to stack up those points, we're about halfway through the year.
Points.
Go check them out.
The bottled bond from Old Forester, I feel like it's a little like sneakily underrated. No one really talks about it, but it's really good. And I got a sample of it. TJ, you'll appreciate this. The night Willie Taggart was about to be fired, it was after the Miami game. My friend Elliot, who will join this podcast at some point because he's a huge bourbon collector, gave me a sample of the bottled and bottled Forester. I brought it home. After Willie Taggart and FSU had lost to Miami, I started writing the quote unquote obituary to his obituary. I said it correctly there, to his career just then. And after I finished it, like at midnight, and had it ready to go, and like we were hearing that he may get fired the next day, that ended up happening. Had it ready to go. I poured a little of that bottled and bond, so it was good.
That's a very relevant story to your friend Elliot and everything we've been discussing today. So interesting story, though, that like you got that sample like literally the day before a man lost his job. I wasn't even into bourbon at that point. So if I would have been, though, I'll just say I would have had a lot that night.
It wasn't celebratory.
I was going to say, it's the way you presented it sounded pretty celebratory. The fact that you were getting to cover another coaching search, and your bonuses probably went through the roof. Like, you got to love that. So anyway, all that said, he was celebrating with the fourth best of the 4-year lineage there. No, I'd say the 1870 is the fourth best. We should do that at some point. The 1897, that bottled and bond one that you're mentioning, is fantastic. It is really, really good. I got this 1870. Haven't had it for a long time. Excited to crack it open and try it. Ben, after we've had so much bourbon again, we did that blind taste test of those four a long time ago. I'm excited to do that again. We need to get our Patreon set up. We just go ahead and get that done, because that 4x4 is fantastic. They're all really great. I know the 1920 is going to win, but like it's really great, like all four of them. So anyway, Old Forester makes a great product. That one you're searching there, that single barrel strength is going to be phenomenal.
Amazing.
So, guys, follow us on social media if you're still tuning in, if you're still listening. It is Bourbon on a Budget everywhere you can find it. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, all of the above. Please go hit subscribe if you're listening to this podcast, whether it be on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, or any more. If you're on YouTube, please thumbs up and maybe send this to a friend. We'd appreciate it. We will be reviewing, as Brendan said, Smoke Wagon Small Batch on Thursday of this week.
Smoke on the water.
Isn't it Smoke on the Wagon?
Fire in the sky.
We will review that on Thursday. Please stay tuned for that episode. For myself, TJ Pinger, Ben Cock, and Brendan Sinone, we appreciate you guys hanging out. My Norland glass says cheers.
Smoke on the water. Fire in the sky.